see everyone here this morning. I'm going to be talking from the book of James, the Lord's brother. And he starts out his letter in a really unusual way. I mean, I think this is, when you look at that, some people could see the statement that he makes there and say, that's impossible. Consider it pure joy. My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, is that usually how people look at this? When they see trials of pure joy, consider it pure joy. Not usually. I want to go over this with you so that you can have a clear picture of what he's talking about. Not be in the fog, but be able to see how beautiful this teaching is that he has. And really, when you look at what he says and you understand what Jesus says, you can see how they relate. And I'll bring this together before the conclusion of this lesson. This statement that Jesus makes, give and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. This saying of Jesus gives insight into what James writes. And you'll see how this comes together by the end of this lesson. We find that he gives three ways to deal with trials. One of them is joy, with joy. Another one with prayer. And another, as you continue reading through this, have the right insight on all of this. And so first of all, we'll start with joy. Joy is not a usual skill for people to use to cope with difficulties. Instead, people come up with thoughts like these and see if you might agree with this. What did I do to deserve this? Why is God punishing me? I didn't think Christians ever had any problem. I don't know where they got that thought. Maybe televangelists. I must have done something wrong. Thoughts like these, I think that people express, they're understandable, but they're not joyful. People can begin to just dwell on their problems, and their lives can become very self-centered. They begin to see nothing good happening in their lives, resulting in just griping and complaining. Paul urges Christians to stand out like stars in the sky. And being self-centered with self-pity parties full of griping and complaining, make them more like the darkness in the sky, not the stars. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, Paul writes, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. Now when you think about these trials, James writes, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Trials you purposely cause or that you deliberately walk into are not what he means. In Proverbs 22 verse 3 it says, a prudent man sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and they suffer for it. Now I don't know about you, but if I'm in the car facing that vehicle on the way there, I'm not going to go into a head-on collision, are you? I don't think you are. I think you're going to get out of the way. You may not be able to get that person to move over, but you might be able to move over and get out of the way. There's no need going through a head-on collision. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Did you see? He said face. James doesn't say if you face the trials. An example of this kind of trial would be a story that Jesus tells of a man walking from Jerusalem to Jericho and robbers attack him. Was he planning for robbers to beat him and rob him? Was he planning on that? No. In reply, Jesus said, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. An excellent visual of this kind of trial would be a sinkhole that all of a sudden appears. It wasn't your fault. Well, you can blame yourself. I shouldn't have been driving that way to get to a certain destination. I shouldn't have been on that road. You don't know. These kind of things happen. These are the kind of trials that we're talking about, not the trials that you deliberately cause in your life. There's another word, instead of rejoicing for that, it's repenting. Once you repent, then things will change and rejoicing may come. But I'm talking about a trial that you do not cause, but it happens in life. So what are you to do? Trials one falls into without any warning. Well, James says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. It's not hard to be happy when all is going well. When you have good health, plenty of money, good family, everything's going fine. The real challenge comes when the roof falls in, losing our health, money, friends, when we have unexpected failures, someone criticizes us and we don't know why. But even in situations like that, James says that we can choose. You can choose. We can choose to be optimistic because we know that persevering brings results. And in this case, the development of being a mature disciple of Christ. And in a moment, we'll look at what a mature disciple of Christ does and how it relates to this joy. He continues by saying, perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Perseverance, not giving up. The following proverb really describes this idea. Do not lie in wait like an outlaw against a righteous man's house. Do not raid his dwelling place, for though a righteous man falls 7 times, he rises again. But the wicked are brought down by calamity. Well, a characteristic of the righteous is that they're not brought down by calamity. If they are brought down, they get right back up. They get that 7 times. This is completeness. They get back up. Not giving up matters. Just look at these examples. Noah waited 120 years before it rained. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. Joseph served 14 years of unjust imprisonment before he was vindicated. Moses, he waited 40 years in the desert before leading the Hebrews out of Egyptian bondage. Well, it was 40 years as a shepherd. You look at what happens according to the following 2 verses. Jesus says, but the seed on good soil stands for those with a noble and good heart who hear the word, retain it, by persevering, produce a crop. Paul writes, he says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. So we're to keep doing good. It's the way of wisdom. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So we see in this that we are to choose how we look at trials. We can count, consider. Secondly, we can be positive when facing trials, pure joy. And there's a reason to be positive. I'll explain it in just a moment. Our faith will be proved genuine. The testing. And when it develops perseverance, not giving up, it leads to maturity. Now again, these are trials. He didn't say if you have them, he said when. So what are we going to do? We've got two choices. We can consider it pure joy, or we can gripe and complain and have a big self-pity party. We get all self-centered on ourselves. Can we have pure joy in facing trials? Can we develop perseverance? Can we be mature and complete? Yes, we can if we believe what James wrote. He wrote this for those early Christians. James is not writing these early Christians facing all kinds of trials that there are 10 easy steps to spiritual maturity. You're not writing that. Someone, a person can struggle to keep his head above water. The person might be saying, when it rains on people, it pours and is pouring on him. This is ridiculous. Most of us have experienced that feeling at some time or another. But what are we to do? Well, the trouble, different quotes I've heard different ones say. The trouble with most people is that they stop trying in trying times. But trying times are no time to quit trying. Keep trying when others quit. One great, we wouldn't call him theologian, but he was a great football coach. And I don't even know if some of you even know who he was. Vince Lombardi, the first coach who won a Super Bowl. Once you learn to quit, it becomes a habit. Kind of a motivational speaker, Paul Meyer, he wrote, 90% of those who fail are not actually defeated. They simply quit. Discouragement can readily come when you don't feel well. We all face discouraging times, especially when our health or with the health of someone we love. So the question is, are we going to give up or get up? Here's the key to not giving up. It's found in Proverbs 11, verse 30. A good person gives life to others. A wise person teaches others how to live. And so we see that these trials come. And we face trials in life, and these trials are not because of our choices or bad decisions, but they happen. They may occur because of someone else's decisions or unexplained illness or accident. So what are we to do? When they come, we can choose to get depressed, complain, have a big self-pity party, or face them with joy, knowing that we can be stronger and more mature when we endure. Yet even knowing this, we may struggle and need more wisdom, more insight. So what are we to do? Well, James says, pray. Pray. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. So if you can't make any sense out of all this, pray. God listens. He's the God of comfort. He's listening to us. Pray. And I think when we do that, and we continue to read His Word, we'll get insight into all of this. And maybe what I'm going to explain to you now, present to you, will give you more insight, I hope. James has said so much about the value of trials and problems, that some may get the idea that God personally and deliberately sends us all our problems to make us mature. So here's some wisdom for which James says that we are to pray. He says we're to pray to God and we're going to receive some insights and wisdom. James says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised of those who love Him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. We also know that Peter refers to the devil as a lion looking for someone to devour. That's what I've got pictured here. That's why temptation is from, that is why temptation and sin, they come from evil and Satan, not God. Then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. God only gives good gifts, not temptation. Anytime we see people using His wisdom, helping others, we're seeing His wisdom. It's a gift from above. Here's an insight relating to this statement. This statement is how he begins the book of James. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So we can choose joy rather than self-pity, because we become more empathetic disciples of Jesus. One of the good and perfect gifts that come from above is God's wisdom. And here is James talking about that wisdom from above. Right in this letter, and I think as you go through this, it helps explain the introduction of the letter. And say, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all, pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. But there's a wisdom that comes from the world. It's counterfeit wisdom. Now look at the characteristics of counterfeit wisdom. It's in the same passage in James chapter 3. People harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition, boasting and denying the truth. Now look at that. Do you think people who are envious, have selfish ambition, they're boasting, they're denying the truth, where is their focus? On self? On self. Are they going to be empathetic people with others and encourage others? No, they're going to be boasting, they're going to have selfish ambition, all of that. But the wisdom from above is full of mercy and good fruit. They're considerate, peace-loving. James says, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So characteristics of peacemakers or the mature are considerate, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. In other words, they are empathetic and helpful to others. That's an important reason we can consider it pure joy when we face trials of various kinds, because we will end up being more empathetic and helpful servants of Christ, bringing joy to others. And God's wisdom says that a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Now we can see why we should look at trials with pure joy. James, the Lord's brother, was already wise and insightful when Barnabas and Paul and Titus came to him early in Paul's career of reaching people, teaching the Gentiles. James and the others, they say to him, to those three, to Barnabas and Paul, Titus, all they asked, this is when he writes to the churches of Galatia, all they asked was that we should continue to remember the poor, the very thing I had been eager to do all along. Notice the empathy. That is having a better understanding of what people are going through that James teaches in the following passages. This all relates to having pure joy in facing trials and becoming a more mature, compassionate disciple. Suppose a brother, this is in chapter 2, we're working our way back toward the first chapter. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. James teaches here about faith and works. And in doing so, in this second chapter, he includes empathy or mercy in his argument. He does. If one of you says to them, this person, I just live by faith, not works. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? What we say to people can help in certain situations, not this one. This person still goes away hungry and needs clothes. It's like, a person needs some help, so we'll be praying for you, and that's all we can do, really. Here's an example I like. A chaplain walked up to a wounded soldier lying on the ground, and the chaplain asked him if he would like to hear a passage of Scripture. But he angrily said, no. Is there anything else I can do for you, said the chaplain. And he said, I'm thirsty. So the chaplain gave him a drink from his own canteen. Is there anything else, he said? I'm cold. So the chaplain took off his coat and spread it over the soldier. Is there anything else? He said, my head is uncomfortable. So he took off his cap and arranged it under the soldier's head and then asked again, anything else? The soldier then looked up to him with tears in his eyes, and he said, I think I'd like for you to read to me from the Bible. The chaplain, in a sense, had already been reading mercy and compassion to him by being the living Bible. That's the only Bible some people will see or read. It's us. We wanted to get them to the point where they're actually opening up the Bible, of course. But going back to the first chapter again, we see the empathy of compassion and mercy when he describes what true religion is. Well, what is true religion? Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. If you're polluted by the world, you wouldn't do that. The root meaning of the word translated widow is a person in need. The English words indicate those who have lost their father or husband by death. But the Greek words will allow wider usage. Death is not the only word starting with a D. A breadwinner from a family can be removed in other ways besides death. desertion, drinking, disease, dope, divorce, and delinquency. The point is about people in real need. All people who have physical, spiritual, or emotional needs. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. I've just described one of the good and perfect gifts coming from above, caring for people in need like orphans or widows, just people in need. So a factor for considerate pure joy James gives is those who are mature share. Here's an example of a sharing man in the news just recently. His name's Anthony Talley. And he's no stranger to trials. But through his challenges, he is fighting harder to help others. Back in 2005, he said, I lost a child. Then 5 years later, I lost a second child. But I know that everything God has put me through was just to build me up, he said. And we know what he's trying to say. But I would change the language a little bit. God has put me through this to build me up. No. God has allowed these things to happen to me. And what's he going to do about it? James would say, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete. And so how is he showing his growing maturity, this guy? Months ago, after meeting with a friend in hard times, he thought, how can I help? And he started what he calls the Dollar Thursdays. On social media, he asked people to give $1 to help someone in need. He has now helped people with $20,000 donated. $1 on Thursdays. Here's an example. So Anthony has now helped many people through tough times. A man with lupus. A barber who had to shut down his barber shop because of COVID-19. A family whose house burned down. And many more. He gave $100 to a woman going through a very challenging time. And he says most people think that's not a lot. But when you're down bad, that could be everything. He has now given over, as I already mentioned, $20,000 to those in need. Not out of his own pocket, but from the donations of others. How has he been able to accomplish this kind of deeds? A recent news headline reads, a Georgia man is changing people's lives $1 at a time. So if you read the bulletin this last week, you read part of that article in there. This last week I went over to visit my mom in Owasso. Had a very nice visit with her. And so I'm leaving to go home. They've got what they call QTs over there, not on Qs. So I go into a QT to get my diet A&W root beer. And I go in there to get my diet A&W root beer, and this woman comes up to me. She's fairly short. She looked like she was in need. And she said, do you have a quarter to spare? And I said, I don't think so, but let me look at my wallet. And so I looked at my wallet, and would you accept $1? So, oh, yes. Hey, I just written the article about $1 on Thursday. Well, this was $1 on Tuesday. I didn't do it on Thursday. It was a Tuesday dollar. But what do we do? You know, I used to feel like if someone comes up and asks me, well, what are they going to do with that money? Do I need to judge how they're going to spend that money? And people are in need. They might not use it right. But then again, they might use it right. And it might be very helpful to them. So, look at this. Is it impossible To consider it pure joy now that you know what this pure joy is all about. It's about you becoming a more mature disciple of Jesus. More generous, more caring, more empathetic, more understanding with others. We go through these trials. And these are not the trials that we cause. I'll give you a personal example. When I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in first grade when I was 7 years old, that was that kind of trial. I did nothing to cause it at all. It happened. And there's a variety of things that are like that. He says, and people can grieve. You can have pure joy and grieve at the same time. But the idea is, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. When reading James, we know what mature and complete includes. Helping others in need with empathy and compassion. We grow spiritually by serving, not by being served. And joy is the result of bringing joy to others. So at the beginning of trials, let's consider it pure joy, as we may also go through grief. And the result will be, as Peter puts it, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate, and humble. So that's the lesson from the Lord's brother, James, for us today. Let's be more understanding, more compassionate, and realize that if we have the right perspective, right attitude when we face these trials, we can become more and more that way, more and more like Jesus. If you've never come to